to our 6th annual Foodways Symposium. I'm Elizabeth Freeman. I'm one of the archival assistants at the State Archives. Our annual Foodways Symposium is one of our most popular and favorite events that we do, and it celebrates the historical, cultural diversity in Arkansas by showcasing our state's our rich heritage through food. And this year we're focusing on Greek foodways and culture in Arkansas. I just want to get a few thank yous out of the way before we get started. First, I want to thank University of Arkansas Pulaski Technical Culinary, Arts and Hospitality Institute for allowing us to use their space today. They are always very helpful, and they provide the lunch you will be enjoying later, and we are very grateful for them. I also want to thank my fellow archive staff members for all the help and work that they do on all of our events. Today we're going to be having two speakers before we break for lunch. Our first one will be Jeanne Spencer. She has a long history in the local Greek and food communities here in Little Rock. All four of her grandparents immigrated from Greece between 1895 and 1905. She was brought up in the Little Rock Greek community and still an active part of it today. Jeanne and her husband of 51 years, Jeanne Spencer, owned and operated the popular Arkansas Burger Company on Cantrell Road, and she's also the mother of two and grandmother of six. Jeanne will be speaking today on the history of the Greek community in Arkansas. Thank you.
The Greeks were small in number compared to other ethnic groups in Arkansas, but they have made a notable impact. They began as laborers, and they quickly became entrepreneurs and business owners. Their children, and many of their children, and most of all the grandchildren, have gone on and graduated from college. The Greeks began arriving in Arkansas in the late 19th century. Greece was very, very poor. They were pulling out of 400 years of oppression from the Ottoman Empire. Northern Greece was still under the Ottoman rule. They came with a dangerous and difficult voyage with the clothes on their back and maybe a few coins. My grandfather's story was that he came in 1895 through Ellis Island. He heard that there was some work in Chicago laying railroad track. So he went to Chicago, and when he got there where they were laying the track, he heard Greek. There were other Greek young men, ages 16, 17, and he became friends with them. When that work ended, one of the Greek boys that he had befriended said, "Where are you going to settle?" He said, "I guess around here." He said, "No, you don't want to do that. It's too cold, too snowy, too icy. You want to go to Arkansas." He said, "Arkansas, is that on the water?" He said, "No, but there's a lot of water there. But the temperature and the weather, just like Greece. You'll love it." So he came here. The first Greek that came to Little Rock was Anastasios Stephakis. Most of the young men that came here were from the Peloponnese region of Greece, which is the southern half. They mostly came from the states of Olympia and Sparta. If they knew someone here, that person would usually help them get established. The Greeks would arrive at Union Station, walk up Markham Street to Main Street, and Markham Street was dotted with some Greek cafes. They would look familiar and walk in and get a new friend. By 1902, the first Greek boy was born in Little Rock. His name was Pete Peters. He ended up becoming a pharmacist and owning his own drugstore at the corner of 9th and Rock. And I used to go in there all the time when I was little. I'd pay a nickel for a Coke, a nickel for a glass with a scoop of vanilla ice cream, make my own Coke float, and read my 10-cent Katie King comic book. Eugenia and Peter Compuris were my grandparents, and they housed many of the early Greeks that came to Little Rock in their 2-story house near the corner of 9th and Rock. These young immigrants would work for someone that they knew until they learned the language. Soon they were running fruit stands and vegetable markets, hot dog stands, candy shops, grocery stores, dry cleaners, and shoe shine parlors. But most of them owned cafes and restaurants. At one time, downtown Little Rock had 17 cafes owned by Greeks, and 3 in North Little Rock. I was talking to George Plasteris last night, and his daddy had one of the cafes, and he said there was fierce competition between them. And those owners would get out on the sidewalk and look around to see who was going where. By 1905, there were enough Greeks to form the Homer Society for religious reasons and cultural reasons. And the Greek Orthodox priest would come over to Little Rock from Memphis and perform weddings and funerals and baptisms. Kallinikos Kanellis was the first Orthodox priest of Greek descent to come to America. He became a priest in Greece, and then he went to Calcutta, India. After that, he came to America, but there were no Greek Orthodox churches in America. So he went to the Russian Orthodox Cathedral in San Francisco. When he left, well, the Russian people came to Alaska, and then they filtered down the West Coast, and with them came the Russian Orthodox Church. And the priests were in Alaska and then came down to California. And to this day, most of the people in Alaska are Russian Orthodox. Kallinikos left San Francisco and went to New Orleans. And there, the first Greek Orthodox parish was established in New Orleans. Not in New York, but in New Orleans. He went on to Savannah and then to Birmingham. And he started getting a little ill. And he heard that the people in Little Rock were wanting a priest. So he came here because he wanted to take the baths in hot springs. The Greeks here in Little Rock rented the 2nd story over a high-end grocery store near the corner of 9th and Main. And there they were for the next 8 years. They put in a chapel, and the other half was for social gatherings. The chapel was there for them to celebrate the liturgy and to have their baptisms, their weddings, and their funerals. And the other side was for all that good Greek cooking and the dancing. And I wished I had been a part of it.
Yeah.
Then Father Kanellis did become very, very ill. And Theo Polychrone had a cafe in North Little Rock. And he would bring soup to Father Kanellis every day until Father Kanellis died. Father Kanellis is buried in the historic Oakland Cemetery between Socrates Compuris and Anastasios Stathakis, that first Greek that got to Little Rock. The early church leaders were P.G. Johnson, Peter Compuris, Joe Stathakis, Anastasios Stathakis, Peter Stathakis, George Lianos, George Stathakis, Harry Hronas, and Basil Peters. The Arkansas Democrat magazine in January of 1952 had an article about the first Orthodox church in Arkansas. It was a Russian Orthodox church in Slovak, Arkansas, near Stuttgart. It was established in 1894 and closed around 1940. About 15 years ago, my mother and George Lianos' two daughters, and his two daughters were my mother's best friends. Those three ladies and I drove to Slovak in search of that church. And it was long gone. The building was long gone. But there's a beautiful cemetery right next to it with a large Orthodox cross right in the middle of the cemetery. And we visited with some of the women in Slovak. And they told us that when the church closed, the church donated their chalice, their paten, their processional cross to the Episcopal Church in Stuttgart. And I hope they still have those things. The Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church in Little Rock is the oldest continuous Orthodox church in Arkansas. The early Greeks purchased land at the corner of 16th and Louisiana to erect a church. But they heard that the parishioners of Winfield Methodist Church, located at 15th and Center, wanted a bigger church. So they contacted them and they traded. They traded the land at 16th and Louisiana for the old Winfield Methodist Church that was already built at 15th and Center. That happened in 1919. Annunciation received their state charter June 8th of 1920. There were few women among those early immigrants, so the men returned to Greece or the larger U.S. cities looking for their brides. There were many arranged marriages. We still have arranged marriages in our parish today. They've all succeeded. There's less than 1% of Orthodox marriages ending in divorce. And that's compared to all other religions that are in America today. The Balkan Wars preceded World War I. They inspired many immigrants in America, including Arkansans, to return to Greece to help their native land from the Ottoman Turks. Newspaper clippings from the Arkansas Gazette and the Pine Bluff Daily around 1911 described dozens of patriotic young men from Little Rock, Pine Bluff, and Texarkana departing Union Station for New York to offer their services to free their native land from the Ottoman Turks. All returned safely back to Arkansas. Greeks in Arkansas grew quickly in the 1920s until laws were passed to limit immigration. By then, there were about 200 Greeks in Little Rock. And after that point, immigration slowed down considerably. The Greeks that were here were united by their Orthodox faith, their common culture, and their native language. During the 1930s, several families were greatly in trouble. Financially, they were losing their property, their investments, and their bank savings. Some were evicted from their homes. They lived in their businesses or elsewhere, but no one went hungry because most of the occupations were associated with food. Local banks and investors worked with these small business owners, allowing leeway for them to pay their rent so as not to lose their businesses entirely. During World War II, almost all the Greek males served in the U.S. Armed Services from Little Rock and all around Arkansas. These were the sons of those early immigrants. During World War II, it was impossible to give Greece help because of the German occupation. For years after World War II, Greeks in Arkansas shipped many supplies to Greece and helped financially for recovery there. The Greek community in Fort Smith had about 30 families in the 1930s and 40s. Fort Smith was lively because of Fort Chaffee during World War II. Most Greeks there had cafes. They were so busy that they had to close in the middle of the afternoon to catch up on dishwashing, clean the restaurant, and cook more food. The Nick Avalos family especially took care of those Greek American servicemen that were stationed at Fort Chaffee. The first Greek immigrant in Pine Bluff is probably Andrew Macris, about 1906, along with James Stevenson. They founded the OK Ice Cream and Candy Company in 1912. Along came 6 Pascal brothers and cousins in 1911. When Macris returned to Pine Bluff from the Balkan Wars, he brought his lovely bride Anna and his sponsored relatives, George and Peter Zach and Gus Pappas. They all eventually became partners in the OK Dairy. Gus Pappas first sold ice cream on the street as a vendor, and then he got into candy making and became very proficient. So Gus was head of the candy making at OK Dairy. At one time, there were about 16 families in Pine Bluff. In the early 1900s, Greeks and their families arrived in Hot Springs. They were all entrepreneurs, and they worked long hours to support their families. Peter Pappas arrived about 1903. He was later joined by his 3 brothers, and they opened up Pappas Brothers Cafe. During the Depression, Pappas Brothers Cafe, the Deluxe Cafe, and other Greek-owned cafes served countless needy people in Hot Springs. And they even fed the students at the nearby schools who didn't have lunch money. There were also about 10 immigrant families in Texarkana. And guess what? They had cafes. In 1960s and 70s, there were Greek students that came to Arkansas, mostly males, to attend college. A few women came here that had married American servicemen who were stationed in Greece. In the 1990s, until today, there are Greek immigrants who come to work in the medical field at UAMS. Most of them are doctors. In the 1970s, Annunciation outgrew their facility downtown, and they built a church at the corner of Napa Valley and St. Charles. It was completed in 1983. Gus Vratsinas, your next presenter, was president of the parish council at that time. I had heard the story about how my grandfather came here through Chicago and how he was told by that young man to come to Arkansas. I was satisfied with that. And a friend of mine, Dots Fry, her mother died. And I was at her house the day that her mother died after the funeral, and there was a man, already had his lunch, sitting on the sofa, and I sat next to him, and I didn't know who he was, and I introduced myself. I said, I'm Charlie and Jeanne Spencer's daughter. He said, how did your grandfather come to Little Rock? And I told him the story. He said, who was that young man that told him to come here? And that was like a bullet between my eyes. It never even dawned on me to wonder who that young man was. And he said, that young man was my daddy. His name was Chris Scrivanos. My grandfather's parents came to Little Rock about 1915. They lived with my grandparents and my father and his brothers and sister for 10 years in that 2-story white house near Rock Street and 9th that housed those early Greek immigrants. My grandchildren are now members of Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church here in Little Rock. So my family has now been here for 6 generations. We've seen the Greek journey from the beginning until today, along with many other families. May the Greek heritage go on in Arkansas for many years to come. Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering how many Greek restaurants are still like downtown? Yes, I didn't think so.
0.
Are they, what about in Little Rock?
Let me be delicate.
Real Greek restaurants, right?
Authentic.
Right, exactly.
Yes. There are several places here in Little Rock that say they serve Greek food. You won't find too many Greeks eating there because it doesn't taste very Greek to us. They're usually franchise restaurants. But no, there's not a one here left run by a Greek. Yes, ma'am.
You had said how many Greeks started in Arkansas. How many are there now, or do you have a count of Greek heritage?
I have no idea. Gus, do you know how many of us there are now?
Probably about the same. There's a big exodus in the 40s and 50s and 60s when the younger people grew up. There were more opportunities in other areas, so they left and went to Texas and California and that kind of thing.
Did y'all hear that? Many of them left in the 40s and 50s and 60s for greater opportunities in larger cities. Yes, sir.
Do you know about the origins of Leo's and Kavanaugh and Hillcrest?
They're not Greek at all. Never were. No, that restaurant was started by an Italian who was from Argentina. He came to America and ran a Greek restaurant. I knew him. We ate there a lot.
Jeannie, is there any place in Arkansas?
Hi, Ann.
Hi, I'm glad to
I didn't
see you.
realize you were here.
Thank you. Is there any place in Arkansas where we could go to eat authentic Greek food?
I know of one place very well, the Greek Food Festival. That Greek Food Festival is run by the parishioners at the church. It is cooked fresh when you eat it, and they know what they're doing. So it is real.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the current membership of the church?
Oh, what's the current membership, guys, of our church here?
About 250 families.
About 250 families. I will tell you that when I was growing up, everybody was Greek. George Plasteris' sister married a non-Greek, and my Uncle Jim Compuris married a non-Greek, and they were the only two. And now, we Greeks are in the big minority in Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church. I believe we have something around 14 or 15 different nationalities in the Orthodox Church. How many? 17 nationalities in our parish. When you see those people going up for Holy Communion, it looks like the United Nations. They come from Romania, Egypt, and Ethiopia. Ethiopia, believe it or not, is a very Christian nation. And the Ethiopians are all Ethiopian Orthodox. Yes, ma'am.
Are there large populations of Greeks in other parts of the country, like Chicago or New York?
Huge. huge. You know, the Greeks came, most of them came through Ellis Island. And the majority of them stayed up north. So even today, in the large cities up north and even in the middle-sized towns up north, there are Orthodox churches as numerous as a Baptist church is in Little Rock. You know, I mean, they just stayed up north. And very few, in comparison, came to the south or went out west. I remember Alex Tappas telling me one time, he was a doctor at UAMS, and he was from Charleston, South Carolina. And he said his mother used to tell him all the time, "Oh, thank God I'm a Greek in the South." So,
I went to a restaurant in Detroit when I was there once, and there was a very great neighborhood, and the street signs were even in
Greek.
Greek. Yeah.
Uh-huh. You know, I had heard that too about Chicago on Halstead Street in Chicago. I heard about that all my life growing up. And so my husband had a business meeting in, what's that town north of there? Jana, where did we go? North of Chicago. Milwaukee. And so we went to Chicago for the day, and I headed toward Halstead Street. And I was so disappointed. The biggest sign, it was huge, and it said in big 4 letters, T-H-A-I. Yeah, Thai food. And there were a few Greek restaurants, maybe a couple of Greek restaurants and a couple of gift shops, and that was about it. But back in the heyday, it was like going to Greece. Like Tarpon Springs, Florida, if you've been there. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned these eaters was the first Greek boy.
Uh-huh.
That's our family, in our family name. Sam Peters was our great-grandfather.
Are you of Greek heritage? Oh, how wonderful.
We've always wondered how they got here, other than Ellis Island and all that. But Basil Peters was not, we don't recognize that.
Well, he was one of the church leaders, and Pete's wife was named Ellen, and she was from South Carolina, Beaufort, South Carolina. And my mother was from Augusta, Georgia, and so they were good friends because they were neighbors before they came to Little Rock.
You know the story about the Peters?
No? Do you? Tell it.
Yeah.
Come here. Tell it. Gus is going to tell you the stories about the story about the Peters.
There's an interesting story about the Peters, and I can't verify this, but May Peters, who lived here forever and a day, she moved where her sons are in Johnstown, PA. She had told us that Peters is not a traditional Greek name, and there was a boat that came in from Greece, and there were God knows how many men on it back then. And the customs agent, it was late, he was supposed to be home. Everybody that came through the deal was John Peters, Pete Peters, and Tom Peters, because he didn't want to go through the deal of the
Greek
last
names.
names. So
Petimizas.
this is what May Peters told me at one time. That's why that's the Peters. And in fact, the Peters that we know, that family, they were Petimizas. It was their real name. And some of the boys, some of the younger people, like George Placeris, they went through and they, George's father Americanized the name to Plaster, and George went back and changed his name back to Placeris, and so did May Peters' sons, changed their name back to Petimizas. And this is also true of other immigrants like that came from Russia, the Marinchuks. It was Americanized to Marin, and some of the offsprings have changed their name back to Marinchuk. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, you didn't. Not at all. Yes, sir.
Where do you recruit your ministers? Like, is there a seminary in North America anywhere?
Yes, Holy Cross, and is a Holy Cross School of Theology, and it's a college in Brookline. And Gus is on the board up there. And then the priests are through the Archdiocese of North America. And so they do the assignments for the priests at all the
One diocese.
one archdiocese. We have dioceses all over the country with bishops in charge of those, but the archdiocese is in Manhattan. Yes, ma'am.
Intrigued by your divorce rate.
Well, I'll tell you. It's my version of it, okay? When you come to a Greek Orthodox wedding, there's one thing that you will not hear, and those are vows said by the bride and groom. The other thing you won't hear is the priest saying, "I now pronounce you man and wife." Because the bride and groom enter that church that's the house of God. They don't take it upon themselves to take the power of marrying the other person by saying vows. They said their vows when they walked in that door. That told everybody they were wanting to marry the other person. The priest never says, "I pronounce you man and wife." He says prayers asking God to marry them. And there's a point that God marries them. They can't hold hands until it's after that point. And then the priest puts their hands together. The very first thing they do after that is walk around a table there in the front of the church. And on that table is the open Bible. And they walk around that table 3 times. The priest is holding the groom's hand, and the groom is holding the bride's hand. 3 times while he's chanting prayers. And what that represents, the priest is representing Christ. And Christ is leading them in their very first steps of their married life, going around the Bible, which represents them walking a Christian way of life. To a Greek Orthodox, their religion in Christ and the Holy Trinity is everything to them. They were married by God's blessing. You don't take that lightly. You know when you're married with God's blessing, you take it very, very seriously. And the power is not in you. The power comes from there. And that's probably why there's less than 1% divorce rate. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Jeanne, why did so many young people leave in the, 40s, 50s? That they don't continue the cafe heritage?
Well, I'll tell you, in my opinion, and Gus can help me on this, those early Greek immigrants came to Little Rock and they could open a cafe because they didn't have a higher education. They knew how to cook. They could figure out pretty quickly how to run a cafe, and they made a good living at it because they all knew how to cook. But I'll tell you something, not a one of those early Greek cafes served any Greek food. Not a one of any kind of Greek food. They sold burgers, spaghetti, with chili on it, plate lunches, but not Greek food. Because the palates of Little Rock, back in the 20s, they weren't ready for Greek food. You know, when I was growing up in Little Rock, I can remember one Chinese restaurant, Canton Tea Garden, on Main Street, and one Italian restaurant, Bruno's Little Italy. And after that, there weren't any ethnic restaurants. And now they're everywhere, all of ethnicities. But back in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and 50s, Little Rock just wasn't ready for that. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
When did they start serving Greek foods in Little Rock?
Well, at the food festival was really the first, and it's really the only place you can get authentic Greek food in Little Rock. The real stuff, the stuff that tastes like what Greeks eat at home. You know, when you go to a Greek restaurant up north or in Houston or Dallas, you can get food in a restaurant that tastes pretty Greek if it's run by a Greek. But there's nothing like eating in a Greek home. There's nothing like it. If you ever get invited to eat at a Greek home, you better go. Yes, ma'am.
You're gonna have to invite us all.
She said, you know you're going to have to invite us all. Now you know why my husband served some Greek dishes at Arkansas Burger Company. There was a big influence there.
Did you influence our menu today?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. In fact, I believe Jill is serving my recipe for Greek baked chicken and potatoes. And then there was I lived in Dallas for 25 years. My husband started the family planning program down there at the medical school. And I became very good friends with a lady named Pepicha Buziotis. And she had a recipe in the Dallas Symphony cookbook for her pastizo. And that's the recipe that I always use. And I gave it to Jill. So y'all will be having Pepicha Buziotis' pastizo today. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that all the fast foods now, the fast foods in general, have just messed up with authentic restaurants like authentic Mexican, authentic Greek, and I think it just messed up everything for the authentic restaurants?
Well, I don't want to say yes or no. She asked if the fast food restaurants messed up the authenticity of the ethnic restaurants. I really don't know, but it's always been said that Greek food is difficult to fix. I mean, it's time consuming for the baklava or the spanakopita or whatever you want to fix. A lot of people have asked Gus's brother, Pete, to open up a Greek restaurant here in Little Rock because he's a great Greek cook. And he doesn't want to do it because it is so time consuming and difficult. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a local cookbook of Greek recipes that's based on?
We have one at our church that you can buy during the festival. And but there's different nationalities are in that cookbook because we have so many nationalities in our parish. But to tell you the truth, my favorite Greek cookbook is from the church in Charleston, South Carolina. And I don't know, it's blue and white. Just Google the Greek Orthodox Church in Charleston, and they'll have it there about their Greek cookbook. But I can remember my husband and I went to Charleston, and we went to church that Sunday morning. And the priest was saying how there was going to be luncheon afterwards, and everybody was invited. And so we hung around and hung around and hung around, and not one person came and talked to us. And I said, well, we're not staying for that lunch if they can't even come and talk to us. So we went out to the Isle of Palms, and we were walking along the beach. And then again, that bullet came between my eyes. I went, oh my God, these are the women who did that cookbook, and I'm missing their food. I can't believe it. So I missed out on my big opportunity. Yes, ma'am.
I think I need to clarify the question. Well, I was trying to get to it, but people would rather eat fast food than eat authentic food. So
Oh, okay, I misunderstood her. She said she thinks that people here want to eat fast food rather than the authentic food. Is that right? And, but I do know that the fast food of Greek cooking here in Little Rock is not really authentic. They try to be. I mean, like I won't mention it, but there's a restaurant here in Little Rock that was started because a man went to Greece and loved the food. And he came back to Birmingham and got one Greek cookbook. And he started cooking out of that one Greek cookbook. And he said that this tastes pretty good. I think I'll start a franchise. He didn't ask one Greek for their opinions or for any of their recipes. And he started a franchise. Just all he had done was eat Greek food in Greece. And that franchise is here in Little Rock now. But you won't find too many Greeks eating there. Any other questions? Well, thank you very, very much.
Our next speaker will be Gus Vratsinas. Vratsinas, sorry. I even had asked and practiced beforehand. He is the chairman of Bailey Construction and Consulting LLC of Little Rock, which started in April 2011. He has 42 years of management and professional engineering responsibilities. He's also affiliated with Vratsinas Enterprises LLC. He holds a Master's of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Arkansas. He was married to the late Irene Vratsinas of Mason City, Iowa. They have 2 children and 5 grandchildren. He has been active in many civil and other endeavors. He is active in his church and currently serves on the board of trustees for Hellenic College in Holy Cross. In 2004, he received the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, named the Arkansas Construction Hall of Fame in 2006, and in 2011 was named the Arkansan of the Year. What he will be speaking about today will be the history of Little Rock's Greek Food Festival.
Thank you. I don't have a lot of prepared comments like Jeanne did, but anyway, sort of got the circulation going, her talking about some of the stuff, and you heard me earlier talk about the Peters. Another very common Greek name is Pappus, and the evolution of Pappus was similar to Peter's, whereas in Greece, a lot of the family names came because of the religious connotations of the church. And in Greek, the word for priest is papa. So a lot of the Greek names were Papa George, Papa John, Papa Ioannidis, Papa this, that, and other. And there's many stories about the boats that came in late and the customs people a little bit lazy. And as they were coming through, it was Gus Pappus, Jim Pappus, John Pappus. And back in those days at the, turn of the century, the people that came here were just appreciative of being in the United States. They didn't even think about recourse of going and correcting the record. And it was only in the latter years that the second, third generation picked up on the fact that I ought to go and change my name back to what it really was. So that just little sidebar. I've been asked to talk about the Greek Food Festival, and a lot of you are very familiar with it, and give you a little historical perspective. My father had one of those 17 cafes, didn't serve Greek food, blue plate specials and that kind of thing, and he was at 2nd and Main, and there were 3 of us, and the whole goal
of my parents was for their children to be educated where we didn't have to work in a restaurant. And I mean, I was down there, I did it all. Busboy, cleaning the restrooms, mopping the floors, dishwashing, short order cook, you name it, we had to do it. And that was starting when you were 8 years old. And anyway, somebody asked me a long time ago, says, why do you get involved in these food festivals and, you know, that kind of thing? Because to me, it's a reminder that I was not in the restaurant business because of my parents. So anyway, a little bit of Jeannie gave you a good snapshot of the evolution of the Greek community and the foundings of our church here in Little Rock, and brings us up to what we want to talk about is Greek Food Festival. And we've come a long way from 15th and Center, you know, back 1919 to today, where, you know, the Greek Food Festival, known also as International Greek Food Festival, has become, you know, according to a lot of surveys, the best festival, you know, around, and which we're very proud of. But the beginnings of something like the Greek Food Festival did have humble beginnings. And when did it start? Well, it started a long time ago when some of the enterprising women in our church started what they called, you know, the Greek pastry sale. And under the leadership of Catherine Compuris, who's, you know, probably know or have heard of her two grandsons, Dr. Dean and Dr. Drew Compuris, Catherine Compuris and a handful of women actually started doing what they did at their homes, baking pastry.
And your mother?
Well, yeah, my mother was one of them, but anyway. And it started out very small. The kitchen, the old kitchen at 15th and Center was in the basement. So they'd go down there and make a bunch of stuff, and the first few times they did it, put a few tables in the church hall upstairs, invite the public, and they'd sell out in 2 hours. And then it just sort of kept growing. And, you know, later on as that group got older and the younger ones came around, it evolved into a pretty good size endeavor every year, ordering cans where people would buy the pastry and give us Christmas gifts, and just became almost a commercial enterprise. And and that went on at the old church. But at the same time, I was at church one night, and because I think it's important that you understand the evolution of how these things start. We had a parish council meeting at the church, and the phone rang, and you know, the junior league was talking about starting what they called, what became known as Riverfest. And you know, they got me on the phone, says, we're thinking about doing this, and we'd like for the Greek church to participate in it by having a booth down there and serving some kind of Greek food. Would y'all be interested in doing it? Well, our church has always been civic minded, and you know, there were 2 or 3 hanging around there, and they said, yeah, tell them, go, we'll do it. So dumb us, well, yeah, we'll do it. So there are a couple of you here probably remember the first 2 or 3 Riverfests were at Murray Park. And, and it evolved over time, to where it went downtown, and our church had a booth. And about the only thing we knew that we could serve in a fast food type, operation, because people weren't going to sit there all day long waiting on something to come out of the oven, was the gyro sandwich, which back then was relatively new to Central Arkansas and Arkansas. And we got started doing that, and for, God, I don't know how many years we did it, but we did a lot of them. We got very proficient at, putting those sandwiches out, quality and quantity, and people thought that they did get a very good deal. So that's how we started getting involved in that side of it. We also, for about 6 or 8 years, the city had what was known as International Food Festival, that they'd block off 4 blocks down on Main Street, and all these ethnic groups had booths there, and it was well attended. And why some of those things fall by the wayside, a lot of times we know it's lack of people that want to get involved and do the volunteer work, the heavy lifting to make them successful. But we did that for as long as they did that. And again, not only did we serve the gyro sandwich, but they would make pastries, and we had pastries that we'd sell and this kind of thing. And being a smaller, poorer type church, some of the proceeds, and I can say this because was involved there for years doing it. What we did is we took a lot of the proceeds not to operate the church, but to plan for the future. And when the opportunity came around for us to buy the 5 acres at St. Charles and Napa Valley, we were fortunate to have the money to do it. And then we built the edifice, which opened in 1983, right there at St. Charles and Napa Valley Drive. There was also a blessing in disguise for the festival, in that we had plenty of room to have a festival, on the premises. And so about 1985, we, picked up the deal of doing the festival after we'd been out there for about 1.5 years. And we had our first festival at that time. Per today's standards, it was small, a little bit modest, but in any case, it was well attended. From day one, we always said that what we're going to do with the food festival is we want it to be a family type environment. We don't want it to grow into a beer garden and that kind of thing where people are going to come and sit all day long and really not appreciate what we're trying to do. And so from the beginning, and even today, if you go there, it is family-centric type deal. It's real nice. The LRPD, who, anytime you have a bunch of people, you always want them around. They said that's the most disciplined deal that goes on in Little Rock. And it just because of that. As time went on, of course I was opposed to it, and I'm not always right. They were talking about admission, and so we've gotten to a point where we really don't charge admission if you can't afford it. We recommend an admission. We really promote bringing a can of food that's given to the food bank. And the last couple of years, it's staggering, 2-3 tons of cans of food are collected there for the food bank. So, that's another plus in what we're trying to do. I can also tell you that over time that after we burned our mortgage in 1989, 6 years after we moved in, the next year we said we ought to start sharing some of our proceeds with the community, which we do. And, we're very proud of that aspect. And so anyway, that's sort of where we are today. But from the time we started out on Napa Valley with our festival, it's grown. It's got to be a chore for 2 or 3 people, but that's okay too, because at the end of the day, we're all in here trying to make life better for a lot of people. And for those of you that have participated in the food festival or have been there over the years, you can see the menu today does not look anything like the menu did, in 1985. Back in 1985, there were a few pastries and a gyro sandwich and maybe Greek chicken. And where we have come today over time is we've got the other ethnic backgrounds. For 2 or 3, about 4 or 5 years, we had a couple of families from India in our church, and they had the Indian booth. And, the rest of us would really get irritated at them because they would want the whole kitchen to make a few dishes. And we kept saying, and KV Mathen of blessed memory, KV, you can't have the whole kitchen. But anyway, we've done that. We've got the Greek chicken. We, of course, have the gyro sandwich. About 25 years ago, we put in a traditional lamb dinner, which, was another interesting deal. Everybody said, well, nobody in Arkansas goes out and has a lamb dinner. Very few restaurants do it well. So I said, well, it's just a marketing deal. So anyway, we got the idea, went to Heifer International and got a couple of lambs put on a spit, and had a little booth. And of course, the thing is, it took 2 people, to run the spit, and it was a cost. And after we did it for 2 years, they wanted to do it again. And I said, listen, guys and gals, that thing is costing us, $400 or $500, plus it's costing 2 bodies, for 3 days. We don't need it. So anyway, that's grown into, we sell about 1,000 lamb dinners at the festival every year, because it is a traditional deal. We're always open for change, because a lot of times change is good. Sometimes it's bad. But anyway, they got to be up their bonnet about 6 or 8 years ago. Instead of serving the lamb dinner, let's just go ahead and serve lamb shanks. Mm-hmm. And lamb shanks that are done and done right, are to die for. But the problem with them is, and we did them right, they're very difficult to handle in, a park environment. So anyway, we went away from that, and then we had lamb burgers and Greek fries, and they were a big hit. And then we get the complaints from the the people working the deal of, well, you know, it's a lot of hard work and it's hot. So we didn't have the lamb burgers and Greek fries this past year. Well, we did have the fries, we didn't have the lamb burgers. But, and, you know, an interesting thing, and just to amplify on what Jeannie said, you know, about the Orthodox, that we have 17 different ethnic backgrounds in our church. Very few people realize, because a lot of times our schools are remiss in teaching this, but most all of Eastern Europe is Orthodox. All those Eastern European countries and all the old Soviet Union, all the stands, those people are Orthodox. Most of the Christians in the Middle East today are Orthodox. Contrary to popular belief, there are about a third of the population in the Middle East is Christians. They're persecuted, but they are Christian. So we have several ethnic backgrounds from the Middle East in our church. And consequently, you know, about 15 years ago, they all got together and they have what they call the Jerusalem Cafe. And, you know, they serve the falafel, which is, you know, a big hit, and the hummus and, you know, all that other kind of stuff, and tabbouleh salad, which is very difficult to make, you know, and they get the volunteers in there to get in there and get with it and do it, and it really works out very well. We've also, you know, we've learned over time, we've got kids, so, you know, the kids have not developed the culinary expertise that most of us in this room have. They still like a good old hot dog. So we have the youth in our church have a little booth, you know, where they have hot dogs and that kind of thing, and ice cream. And several years ago, it just like manna from heaven. All the scrapings from the baklava pans, which people would go over there and try and do this stuff with it. We made them quit doing it. We got the ice cream, vanilla ice cream, and put all those crumbs and stuff, and they called it a Sunday in Athens or something like that. And they've been doing it all these years, and that's a good way to get rid of a byproduct. And not only children's, but adults enjoy that too. So, you know, we've got all different kinds of food when you go out there. You know, the pastry is still a major operation because of our facility now. You don't see the pastry out in the parking lot or anything. It's inside in the church hall. They've streamlined that, and they get in there starting in late January, start making the pastry, because you can make it and freeze it and serve it within, you know, and they have a major operation. They arts and crafts. There's people that like all the little trinkets and all that kind of thing, and those are sold there. They have what they call a grocery store, where they have all these little things that you can buy. My brother, and she said that he's a big cook, a good cook. He makes his famous salad dressing. Peach salad dressing. And they sell 1,500 bottles of that stuff every year. And in fact, I was in Atlanta, Georgia a week ago, Friday. One of my clients, I'd given him 4 bottles of it, and he says, "I'm on the last bottle." He says, "How do I get some more?" And I said, "Well, next time I come down here, I'll bring you a couple of bottles." So those are the things that we're very proud of. You know, everybody pitches in. everybody does their thing. Everybody grumbles that, oh, we don't need to do this anymore, and you know, I'm tired, you know, call somebody else, and da 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 da. And here we are 36 years later, and it's still going good. And I think some of the culture and the core principles that we've developed over time, people forget about their frustrations of 3 hard days of working, and also not forgetting all those men and women that go in there during the course of February, March, and April, doing what they have to do to get the pastry stuff ready to go. And we've tailored people to their expertise, and knock on wood, it all works out very well. So anyway, we are where we are. We're already, I know we're gonna have another one, because I saw the solicitation. What we do is we always try and get 6 or 8 charities, you know, to share with us, and the word went out that you've got to have any nominations in by October the 7th or some nonsense. So that means that there will be another one. So, but anyway, that in a little capsule tells you where we been, how it came around, and where we are, and hopefully somebody may sit here 10 years from now when it's Greek's time to take the podium to give you an updated report. Thank you. Questions?
Can we do it twice a year?
No Thai food.
What was the name of your dad's place, and when did it cease operation?
It's called the Post Office Cafe, and it was at 2nd and Main. And you know, our government, you know, sometimes does things, you know, for the right reason, and it turns out bad. But they took this little historical background of Little Rock on Main Street from Markham to 2nd on the east side of the alley. There were 30 businesses in there. 30. In fact, her dad and uncle had a dry cleaner in there. One of her uncles had a shoe shine parlor. We had the new theater and the main theater in that block. Had Beavis Pool Hall.
Maxie's Pawn Shop.
No, they were on the side of the street. 30 businesses. When 1957, the government says the best thing going now is urban renewal. So they came in there and bought that whole half block and almost forced them out under eminent domain. And they tore everything down on that half block, and they built the bus station. 3-story bus station that was there for about 25 years. And you know what happened to the bus station? It went down, and now it's the parking lot for the Capitol Hotel. That's just a little, didn't sell a lot of food there, but my dad did back in the day.
Was that the city that did that? Was that the city that did that?
Yes, had a program about that time that they called Urban Renewal. It was a federally subsidized program that they put Little Rock people in charge of it. And I call it social engineering. And I can do that because I'm an engineer by schooling. Yes, ma'am.
What's your crowd size, and what are the best sellers of your at the food?
And the best what?
Best sellers.
Well, you know, the attendance is hard to say. I've talked to LRPD and those kind of people because we don't have a set admission deal. We think that 25 to 30,000 people go through the festival on the 3-day weekend. Our best sellers, typically, the pastry area, I've seen it on Saturday night, because we're open Friday, Saturday, and about half day on Sunday. I've seen it on Saturday night, not a thing in there. The gyro sandwich has been, a bestseller, but you can get a gyro sandwich at, other places, and people that come out more often, they want to experiment. 20 years ago, somebody would come out there and say, I just came out here for a gyro sandwich. Well, now they come out here, for the other things. I mean, we have souvlaki, the cake, the bobs, the chicken, and, they're constantly out there grilling those. And people experiment more now because they know if they want a gyro sandwich, they go to one of these other places that doesn't meet Jeanne's criteria. Or mine. But, and that's why you see other booths, people experiment more and enjoy it. I've said this 100 times, being in the business I'm in, I've traveled literally across the country, and the first thing somebody says, well, Vratsinas, we need to go to a Greek place tonight, and I cringe for the simple reason that you get used to the food as was made by my mother or my wife, and it just doesn't taste right when you go to the best Greek restaurant in Chicago and order the pastizo, and it just doesn't taste like it's supposed to. I just got back from Greece. I went over for 2 weeks this past the early July with my family, and even over there, their pastizo is what I am used to eating. And I can tell you that our food festival, and no difference to your recipe, but the recipe they use out there is my mother's. And the people that make it just like my mother did. And it's to die for. And we have that booth with the salad, and then the spinach and that kind of thing. And so we do get used to it. And my grandson, who's 17 years old, heaven forbid, I'm proud of him. He's out there, got him a job about a year and a half ago, and it's at the Little Greek. And he absolutely hates it when families come in there and they serve rice with a lot of their dishes and everything, and they'll bring little kids in there. You got to clean up the rice, but the owner, Thad Wall, who used to be at Stevens, and he just got burned out, and he and his wife bought the franchise, and they work it. They just got tired of being in that rat race in the investment banking business, and so after he was open, before Will went to work down there, I went in there one day and I said, Dad, I'm gonna just have to try your pastizo. And he said, don't do it. And I said, no, I'm gonna do it. And it's pretty good, but it's that criteria I'm talking about. It wasn't what I was used to. So, but of all the franchisees, they're closer to having the right dishes and that kind of stuff. And I'm not an owner or anything out there. I'm just saying that.
Where is that?
They're in the Pleasant Ridge Shopping Center. And it was right next door to another place which you heard her talk about, the Ottoman Empire. The Istanbul was just right sort of next door to it.
Is he not a member of your church?
No.
End of story.
But he's from Jordan. I thought he was a Christian.
I subscribe to a food blog run by a Greek lady called the Mediterranean Table. What's the differentiation between Greek food and Mediterranean food?
Well, the Greek food, yeah, I've got. Well, he has the differentiation between Mediterranean food and Greek food. Some of it, there's little or none, and I've been fortunate to have traveled, that part of the world, and my two favorite places are Greece and Italy, because I love the food of both countries. They're very heavy in the olive oil,
Right.
and that kind of thing. Their salads, and even when you go around the bend a little bit, Jordan and Syria and that kind of place, they have a lot of the similar dishes. From the Middle East side, the Greeks have impinged with the hummus and the tzatziki and that kind of stuff. So it's sort of all blended together. And
I haven't found a bad recipe on that blog yet.
no, it's that's good. And y'all may remember some gal named Kat Cora.
Yeah.
She's a famous person.
Iron Chef.
Yeah, and her brother lived here for several years. He moved, had an illness, and he's actually moved to Florida. But Kat, she's pretty sharp gal, and yeah, she's obviously Greek heritage. Yes, ma'am.
Are either you or Jeanne's married? Were they arranged? Were your marriages arranged?
I don't. I had a blind date with my wife,
That was it.
and it was a blind date that I had gotten the name from somebody that I knew in our church. Now, they didn't set out and get the families together to do it. They just, by the time I came down the pipe, I'd be a little resistant to that, but I didn't mind going on a blind date every once in a while. Were yours arranged?
I married an American boy.
Was your family upset?
My family, I thought would be very upset, but they weren't. But I will tell you that every time my husband was around a bunch of Greeks, he'd go, "Hi, I'm Dan Spenceropoulos."
My wife actually was, I'm known as the first generation because my parents immigrated in 1939. All four of her grandparents immigrated to the United States, so she's a second generation. And I think one of the funniest things, and of course I've got two children. John has 3 kids, and Christina here in Little Rock has 2, and they were all part and parcel of our trip to Greece. Well, here's Will Martin, 17 years old, and we're in Greece, and we're my parents from a place called Culinary down on the southern tip of Greece, and we were out at a taverna one night, and everybody was eating, having a good time, and they started the music, and people got up and started dancing, and after a little bit, my Little Rock grandson, he gets up, he gets in line. So he moves to the front of the bus pretty quick, and he's sitting there slapping the floor with the palm of his hand, not missing a beat, and the heel of his shoe, you know, which I could never do. And here my first cousins over there were sitting there in awe. Here's this half-breed from the United States, you know, dancing, really cutting a grug in front of everybody, and so where did he learn that? Where did he learn that? Well, his mother, from the time he was 4 or 5 years old, started teaching him how to Greek dance at the festival. And even though when he first walks in, he might appear to be a little bit shy, once he gets comfortable with what's going on in the world, he jumps right in the middle of it. So anyway, those are the little nuances of the food festival that somebody like me is very proud of, that here's my grandson that has learned and has participated and really makes us all proud. You know what I'm saying? Okay, any more questions? I think I got them in there too.
I'm curious about language. Did your parents, were they speaking Greek only when they came over, and did you grow up learning Greek?
Well, I told you, and it's true, my parents immigrated in 1939, but my father actually was brought to the United States at age 12 in 1912, and went to work here and did all that kind of thing. He ended up in Fort Smith, Arkansas with 2 partners, Steve Soteropoulos and Sam Coran, and they had a restaurant on Garrison Avenue. Well, when the Depression hit, there wasn't quite enough to go around to split the pie 3 ways. Well, my father was not married, so he said, "Man, when things get better, I'll come back and get mine." And he had become a U.S. citizen, and he went back, and then got married while he was in Greece. I'm going a long way to tell you the story here, but he got married. My sister was actually born in Greece in 1938, and then when the Germans started prancing around Europe, my father thought it'd be best to be in the United States. So he got on the last boat that before they clamped the harbor there in Athens, and came here, and he came to Little Rock because he had a great uncle. But specifically answer your question, my mother, she went through equivalent of high school in Greece and spoke very little or no English. My father, when he was here in those earlier years, was self-educated because he went through the 7th grade over there before he came here. So, and if you knew the man, he had no accent. His grammar was perfect, you know, and it's something that, you know, we try and teach our children in school, you know, how to do everything, you know, with the English language. And here you got somebody that was self-educated, and it's pretty special. At home, most of the dialogue was in Greek. Outside the house, for the kids, my dad, of course, it was all English. And people ask me, "Are you a bilingual?" And I says, "Yes, I can speak the language and I can, understand everything. But when I go to Greece, they know I'm not a native.
You speak Greek with a southern accent.
So anyway, I went a long way to tell you the little historical deal on that. Any other questions? Good, because I think you're going to feed us. Thank you very much.
Wonderful for like a tea or a luncheon, or you cut it in half, and it's really nice. And it makes, you could put two of them together and send them over to a neighbor as a gift. They're nice that way. It's a nice, yeah, it's easy.
They're very easy. These are a little tricky. They take a little practice. And it's important to keep your phyllo covered if you don't work fast with it, because it will dry out and it will crumble on you. And if it does, you just move on.
Don't try to rescue it. It's not worth it.
Well, I can rescue mine.
It's not worth the aggravation.
Right.
And also, you want to, you're going to probably at the grocery store, I don't know if they used to have them, the full-size sheets of phyllo. The packages were long and skinny, but I haven't found those in quite a while at the grocery store. I've found those almost like a half sheet. You can use those too. You just have to use more boxes. But you want it to thaw in the refrigerator overnight, and then you want to bring it to at least, room temperature before you start handling it.
Now I'm going to roll one for you, and then I'll take some volunteers if anyone wants to give it a hand.
Because this is the tricky part, right?
Yes.
Kidding.
Oh, it is.
Here's some.
Okay, and put that there.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'll show you how to do a log, because that's my favorite, because it's very, very easy. And again, you can make it into appetizer sizes. You don't have to do a big, one big roll. So we're going to take a strip of phyllo. Ooh, and that's hot. Then your hot flare.
Ooh, is it too hot? Did I get it too hot? I'm not used to this stuff. I'm used to gas.
Butter it, butter it. We're going to take a second sheet. And I ripped mine, but that's okay because I'm a good catcher. And we just lay that right on top. A little more butter.
Oh man, that is too hot.
It's okay.
Here, you want to try this one?
And we're
Well, that's
going
hot too.
to butter it. Now, just a little teaspoon will do you, because if you put too much in, they will puff and explode in the oven, so you don't want them to leak all over. Now here's the trick. To make a triangle and not a flag, you want to kind of bunch it up at the bottom and make a little pouch. And then we're going to fold it over to the edge. Then we're going to take the point, go to the other edge, and we're going to go back and forth all the way down. And if you have left over like this, you can fold it over and try it. Then I put them on the pan. Whatever.
I've got a pan right here.
Pan. Well,
There you go.
I'll put it.
You want to put it on that? There you go. Sorry.
That's okay. You don't have to. That is fine. Butter them at the very end again before you put them in the oven. And I make mine ahead of time. Put them in a Tupperware, pop them in the freezer, and then you can take them out anytime and you're ready to go. 350 for 20 minutes, you're good to go. So, any volunteers? Sure, come on up. Anyone? Yeah, come on up.
And then you have these perfect triangles when they come out of the oven.
And we'll serve those.
We're going to let them cool first a little bit before you serve them. But spanakopita can be served at room temperature. It can be served hot. That's the beauty of it. It holds really, really well.
Yeah. And you come on over here. Take one. I think you got two. Yeah, each sheet. Yeah, you have to do one
Just a single sheet.
Do one and
What
butter.
did we do with that little? Where is that?
Nope, you're good.
Do you want me to serve some of these, Peri?
Yes. Put that right on top. Yeah, it's kind of sticky. Did you put two? Philo? Yeah, that might be a little much.
Yeah.
You can pinch, it's okay, we use our fingers. Okay, now you're good to go. Kind of make a little, let me show you the trick. You can't squish it, that's okay. Is that too? Yeah, you kind of got a torn one, so we're going to try to pass it. Kind of, see how I kind of go to the side? And we're going to do that piece of one. Just keep going back and forth. And then you can do another one, you'll be a pro. Oh, this too. That's it. And then you're going to put a little, oh, that's okay, don't worry about it. Oh, you can. I think that's good. You can kind of just put it in the corner. Push the corner up. Start on that side. Kind of making a little purse.
I'm hearing something.
It does look easy, but it is tricky. But once you get it, ooh, this is fun. See?
See, and even I get reprimanded by the authorities at the church about not making them right. You put too much filling. Okay. You didn't fold it right. Okay, I'll do
There
it.
is a reason, because we cast them in a certain way, and if it's a flag, it will not fit in the package. I'm going to show you. Kind of, so fold it in, and you always want to seam down, and then just
Yay! Success!
do one more. Let's see. Yeah.
Like an American flag, like you're folding an American flag. Instead of a perfect, lovely little triangle.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, and we like the look of the triangle.
The perfect triangles. They're all perfect.
And it does make a difference presentation-wise.
Sure.
That was perfect.
So when you're making your pan, which I'm sure most of you would prefer to do than making individual triangles, which, by the way, you can buy at the festival in May, frozen, ready to go. So would you like one? Would anyone like? There you go. Be careful, the filling's hot.
Because it's easier if you don't want to go through this work. That way anyone.
There we go. Sure, let me get some. But let me tell them about the pan for. Oh, thank you. About making the pan first before you do that. You're going to lay out your phyllo dough, and it's going to come up on the sides of the pan. And it's okay to overlap the sheets if it's too, short or. Thank you. Sorry, you got it? Okay. But you're going to brush each leaf of phyllo, each layer. You're going to use 6 on the bottom. Did I say 6 or 8? I can't remember. I think 8. 8 on the bottom, 8 on the top. And it's that makes it really nice. So when you use it on the bottom, you're going to brush each sheet, and each leaf is going to come up a little bit on the side. The top layer, you want to get that as nicely smooth, those last 2 phyllo as you can. But it can overlap. Don't tuck it in. You shouldn't have to do that. But if it's too big, just trim it off with like a sharp knife or scissors. And then again, you're layering it with butter in between, brushing each leaf generously. Don't be too stingy. I mean, you don't want to overdo it, but you don't want to put not enough because it's not going to crisp up. So you want to just brush it on there till it's nicely coated.
Okay, I'm going to show you how to do a Spanakopita log because it's much easier. And like I said, anyone can make this. Appetizer size, dinner size. I just cut my phyllo into
The white strip, this one is falling apart.
I'll try this size. Yeah, these are good. I think we have enough for everybody to have 2.
So, any size again, just cut your phyllo. I think that's 2. Sometimes they're really thin and they will stick together.
Okay. Here, did you get one? Here. Oops, I'm sorry. Be careful, are they too hot? They're good though, aren't they? I know.
And this is 3 layers of phyllo instead of 2. And we're going to butter again. And again, it gets wrinkled, it doesn't matter.
Sorry,
because
I'm trying to go
gonna roll
fast. I think everybody can have another one.
Yes, there's plenty.
Yeah, I think. Well, if they want seconds, they can come up afterwards.
So you got your 3 layers of phyllo down. Again, to make these really cute and small, so you don't have to mess with the triangle.
Plates are a booger.
When we make them, all this is pre-measured, so we know exactly what goes into what roll. It does not matter if you're making them at home. Just big spoonful. Gonna put it at the bottom of the phyllo, at about a quarter of a cup.
Let me get, yeah.
Depending on how big your phyllo is. If I was making them smaller, I would use a little teaspoon like the triangle. So, fold the sides in, like that. On each side, fold it in. There's 3 steps. Fold over and roll. That's simple, right? So fold it in and roll.
Do we have enough?
And you've got this great little spinach log. So wonderful.
Yay!
It was like a burrito. Yeah.
Same amount?
Huh?
Same amount of time cooking?
Yes. And these are great, like I said, for dinner, appetizers, whatever you want to do. So you go. Anyone else want to try to roll?
We got plenty. We got plenty. Don't be afraid of the phyllo.
Come on. One more try. Anyone? Yes.
Come on. Then you'll really appreciate how good these are.
And how hard the triangle.
Oh yeah, and how hard the triangles are.
Once you get the hang of it, you want to do a triangle or the roll? The roll.
Oh, he chickened out. Did everybody get one? Okay.
I would just make them smaller then.
Oh, okay, because of the consistency of the dough.
Yeah, because this
It's
is
not going to be
like, like for festival, we make them much bigger. But this isn't, you would eat that. That's just a bite.
It's just a.
Okay. One, yep.
Do we have? Do I need to do more? Do we have? I think everybody can have seconds. Now, if you're baking them from, after you've made them, you can freeze them. They freeze great. You just want to put maybe, you don't even have to put parchment paper. Just freeze them flat on a baking sheet first before you pack them away. You don't even have to put parchment paper in between them. They'll just stack up and they freeze great. You can have them ready for when you have, a cocktail party or guests or whatever. You're ready to go. And then you just want to bake them at 400 degrees. Don't thaw them before you bake them.
Ma'am, you want to try? Come on. Well, we have time for one more. Come on. Yeah. Then you'll feel confident when you go home and try to make them. You want to do the roll? It's easier or the triangle?
Do we have enough? Do I need more? Okay, I have more in the oven, so if they want to have. Okay.
That's, yeah.
If they want seconds, they're more than welcome.
Yep, and it doesn't matter if it rips like that.
It's easy. Once you have a practice.
I think I could even do that.
I know you could. Did you get one? Did you get a sample?
No.
Please take 2. They're small.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I had already had one layer.
Any questions for us? Yes, ma'am. When they're fresh, I bake them at 350. If I'm baking them from frozen, I'm doing it at 400. And they should only take from frozen about 18 to 20 minutes or until they're, nicely browned. Yes, sir. I have. I've made it before. I made it in Greece, and it was really, really good. It was interesting. I mean, we were stretching it out, and it's kind of like they put a little bit of vinegar in it. I was on Ikaria when we were making it, so and I can't remember what he told me why they put the vinegar in it. I don't remember why they told me to do it, but that's the way they said to do it, and so I just followed along.
My grandmother used to make hers and stretch it over her dining table.
But you made like the skinny, you made the thin.
Stretched and stretched it.
Till it's almost paper thin, but ours wasn't like that. Ours was kind of, you stretch it out, rolled it out, and then folded it over, rolled it out, and folded it over, and then you used it.
Anyone else want to give a shot at rolling these so you know when you go home?
Don't miss it. We won't be here to help you at home.
Yeah, why not? Can you feel confident?
Yes.
You want to do a triangle or a roll? One sheet, the phyllo, you two, one sheet. Okay. And just pick, I'll let you do it, so.
You mean the No, it started all at the same place, and then it just became commercial. They would just stretch it and stretch it and stretch it. And the thing was to get it as paper thin and as flexible as possible. There is a bakery in Astoria, New York that still hand makes all of their phyllo dough, and it is absolutely incredible. They'll ship it out to you if you call them. But it's a Greek bakery in Astoria, and they if you look it up on the internet, I think the New York Times did an article on them, but you can find them on the internet, and they'll ship it, and it is a fantastic phyllo. It's not like this at all. It doesn't really dry out as quickly, and it's very elastic, and it's just lovely. Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, it's lovely. I mean, when you work with it, it's really pretty.
Another thing is too, when you're making these, you want to keep your butter warm. You don't want to let it get really cold. So, of course, I don't have it on a burner right now, obviously.
Because it was so hot.
No, but you want to keep it warm.
Yeah.
Do y'all do any of your pastry with any kind of meat?
Oh yeah, yeah. We don't do it at the festival, but typically in Greece we have what are called kreatopites, meat pies. The pita in Greek means pie. So anytime you hear, Spanakopita means spinach pie. Tiropita, tiri means cheese pie. So kreatopita is meat pie. And it's usually like a ground beef that they'll add, maybe put a little tomato sauce in it with onions and maybe a little bit of cinnamon in there. And then they fill it up, and they make, much like we're doing the triangles, they'll do that with it. Or I made I think last year, didn't I? I can't remember, Jeannie. I made, it was for the festival, I think, or maybe 2 years ago, I made a chicken pita, kotopita.
Mushroom, you can do.
Yeah, well, yeah, they make them with mushrooms, they make them with olives, anything can go in there. You can do anything. It's the same technique, whatever you're filling you want it to be. But that kotopita was, the chicken was, it was, I had never made it before, and it was, if I do say so myself, delicious.
You have the perfect flag. But that's okay. It tastes just good. And it's not going in a package, so perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. When people make flags in the kitchen, it's a mistake, so we get to bake them and eat them. So I think they do it on purpose.
We do. We make a lot of mistakes in the kitchen, just so we can eat the mistakes. That's right. And for quality control purposes. Yes, ma'am. Well, I thought that I'm not quite sure, but it reminded me of a rivani cake, which is, it's a cornmeal type of cake, and it's very, very dense, or semolina, and a semolina cake. You can do, I mean, different regions use different ingredients, so, they typically, it wouldn't have an icing on it. It would have much more syrup.
That's right.
And that's what would keep it right. Or actually, it wouldn't have icing like you and I know. They wouldn't have any. They don't have anything like that when they make the traditional pastries. It would probably have been like a powdered sugar on the top, and then it would have been poked with holes, and then we would put like a honey and lemon syrup that they make. It's almost like a simple syrup, and that would be poured over the top of it, and that's why it has to be so dense, the cake, so it can absorb that syrup and still hold its shape.
Okay, let me see if I can scoot over 1 second. It's hard for me to even explain because it's so automatic. But you start like this, but before you start it's really pouring and bring it over right away. So you're making a little pouch. And then the triangle is already shaped, see? Where this. So now you keep rolling side to side.
Side to side, point to point, right.
Perfect.
There you go.
Yeah. And again, the flag does not matter.
You can still eat it. It still eats great. Would it help yourselves? We've got plenty of Spanakopitas if somebody wants another one or two.
Or to take some.
Or to take some.
Take some to go. Perfect.
Yay, success.
No, it's great.
All right, anything else we can answer about anything? Life? I'm just kidding. Yes, ma'am.
You both have been great.
No. You know, I wouldn't rewarm it unless you warmed it just a tad in the oven. But really, you can eat it cold, room temperature, hot. It's great any of those ways. But once you do put it in the refrigerator, it will get a little bit soggy. It won't be quite as crispy.
The microwave will
make it really soggy. Don't put it in the microwave. I had another question. Yes, ma'am. Sure. It's not critical.
This is the
you know, like you would fold an American flag. You know, it's like.
And this is the triangle.
It's a perfect triangle.
And either is fine. We just do triangles because of packaging purposes. Miss Jeannie makes flags at home, so there you go. Right? You're welcome.
We don't, but you know, we've been talking about maybe kind of introducing a few classes. Not her. Ignore her.
I have time.
I can talk to her about it later. Don't listen. Don't listen. But we have been thinking about maybe offering a couple of classes during the year and highlighting the different regions of Greece and, doing some stuff that you guys haven't had before.
Once a month, maybe.
Once a month? Are you crazy? All right. Well, we enjoyed showing you how to make spanakopitas. Thank y'all so much for coming out, and I hope y'all had a great day today.